Good evening, good morning, good night, whatever the case may be. I am Coach Hughes, and we are going to continue on with our discussions and fireside chats, if you would, about the ancient Egyptians. Today's topic, Chapter 4, Section 3, for all you virtual kids here in my class. And we're going to be talking about the ancient Egyptians, of course, but the Middle and the New Kingdoms specifically today. So without any further ado, let's get started, shall we? Move my head down to the bottom so you guys can see. So we have talked about the Nile River, and we've talked about the geography of Egypt, and pretty much without the Nile River, the longest river at 4,000 miles long, there would be no Egypt. Without the four natural borders of Egypt, the two deserts on both sides. On the western side, you have the largest desert in the world, the Sahara, also known as the Western Desert. On the eastern side, you've got the appropriately named Eastern Desert. Up north, you have the Delta, the Nile Valley, good for farmland, some fertile soil, but a lot of swamp and marshland up that way. And way down south, you have the cataracts, or better known as the rapids. This kind of created Egypt in a bubble. And that led to pretty much isolation for the Egyptians, and it allowed them to grow naturally. And what you're going to see today is the development of social classes in Egypt. Now, from our last lecture, we kind of learned that the Pharaoh was not only king, but a lot of people associated him with a god on earth. More importantly, the Egyptians believe him to be the son of Ra. Yeah, I said that. And Ra was the Egyptian sun god, the most important god. And you got to think about it a couple of ways. Think in your head right now a celebrity, an actor, an actress, a sports personality person that you have met or you want to meet. Maybe you follow someone on a social media outlet like Instagram or Facebook or even Twitter. I know that's outdated. But think about somebody that you would want to follow or meet. To the Egyptians, the Pharaoh was kind of this celebrity. Um, but he was much more than that. If you have that celebrity in your head and the door flung open wherever you're at right now, and your mom, dad, or somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want you to meet," and in walks that person that you had in your head, that celebrity. I just, huh, huh, you kind of get the jitters, some of you. Now, think about this 20-fold from that. If Enter the Pharaoh, who's already a celebrity, if Enter the Pharaoh is not only that celebrity status that you kind of have in your mind right now, whoever that celebrity is, but also you were born and raised, whether you're religious or not, to believe that this person is literally a god on earth. You are in the presence of a god. That's the Pharaoh. That's the Egyptian Pharaoh. He's got celebrity status, but he also has this allure to him that he is a god on earth. So it's not unimaginable in this right here. Social classes develop with the Pharaoh at the top, a god on earth. You're not going to get anybody higher than him. He's already a king, but he also has that God quality. So at the top, the picture you see on your screen there, social classes develop with the Pharaoh at the very top. Nobody higher. Nobles Nobles are the wealthy, the elite. I have money and I want you to know it. They're kind of at the next level. Rich and powerful families, and also priest and high priest make up that upper class just below the pharaoh. And why the priest? Why are the high priest up there? Well, they have access to these gods. And remember, the Egyptians are polytheistic, which means they believe in many gods and goddesses. So they have the avenue and the know how to communicate with these gods and goddesses. Now, in the middle class, they included they included some government officials because I'm in charge. I've moved away from farming. I'm in the government. I have control over your life. So, yes, as I'm kind of making this up as I go, I'm going to say, yes, the government officials are going to be up there at the top. Not that I was making that up, but the governments, they kind of made this up as they went, and they're not going to put themselves at the bottom. They're going to put themselves up there in the upper middle class. Scribes, rich craft people, they kind of make up the rest of the middle class. It's kind of interesting. In some movies that I've seen before, A Knight's Tale, for example, great movie. Born into the lower class, he was asked, or he asked his father, Dad, is there any way that we can go from poor to rich? Now, keep in mind, in this time period, in the ancient world, there is no middle class. Okay, you're rich or you're poor, and there's no in between. There's haves and haves nots. Scribes are kind of a weird situation because they are the people that can read and write, and not a lot of people could read and write. But if you found yourself in the poorer class and somehow you were able to obtain an education and you could read and write, that was really the only way that you could jump from poor to kind of that middle upper class. So scribes were kind of unique. So education, even in the ancient world, it did have a way to pay itself off. Okay. All right. So there's the structure. You've got the pharaoh up at the top. You've got senior officials. By the way, who basically the pharaoh put in that position, family members, scribes, kind of that upper middle, skilled artisans, craftspeople. You got the peasants and the farmers. The farmers always get a bad rap. Gosh, the farmers always get a bad rap. Circle C. Most people, most of the population was the farmers. They were the largest group of people and were in the lower class, really, than not the middle class, because you really don't have middle class. You have the rich and you have the poor. So they're kind of down there with the poor. But they were the largest class and they're providing the food. Without them, nothing exists on this pyramid. And I've always been asked, why? Why didn't they rebel? Why didn't they take the Pharaoh out? All of them against that group of people above them, they could have wiped them out. It goes back to what I was talking about. God on earth. That's the way the Egyptians were raised. They believed this Pharaoh to be a god on earth, the son of Ra, the most powerful of the Egyptians' gods and goddesses. If you had a thought that, hey, this life sucks, well, if you wanted to change that, if you wanted to start a rebellion, it's kind of intimidating to go up against a god on earth. And you have to assume that might be one of the reasons that the farmers, the largest group of people in the Egyptian society, you got to kind of assume that's why they didn't rebel, because they viewed that Pharaoh as a god. And think of it like this: Avengers of Infinity War, where Thanos snaps his finger and half the population ceased to exist. If the Pharaoh was truly a god on earth, then he too has the power to snap his finger and make you cease to exist. And remember from the earlier discussions about the Book of the Dead, the Egyptians cared more about the afterlife than the here and now. And the worst thing for the Egyptians were to cease to exist. Now, the Pharaoh often used people from the lower class as a source of labor. And that is true in pretty much all societies. And that would be the servants and the slaves. Again, you have to think about slaves a little bit differently in your mindset here for the ancient world, because slaves were truly anybody that a group of people conquered. Okay. Any government, any civilization that a group of people conquered, it didn't matter about your skin color. It didn't matter about your ethnic background, your religion. If they had the power, look at these 23-inch pythons, as Hulk Hogan would say. If they had the power and they conquered you, it depends really how their move would be. They could incorporate you into their society or make you a slave. Again, skin color didn't matter. Ethnic background, culture did not matter in the ancient world. Anyone and everyone could have been a slave. Now, let's talk about pyramids. Pyramids were the spectacular stone monuments in the form of a triangle. And they were not houses of worship. They were not, hey, raise the roof, let's party. It wasn't anything like that. They were tombs. This is the final resting place for pharaohs and the elite. The elite. Many pyramids are still standing today. An amazing reminder of Egyptian engineering. Really, they are spectacular. In fact, the pyramids are one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. One of seven ancient wonders, and it is the only structure still standing. Now, it doesn't look as good as it did back in ancient Egypt. Of course, weathering and all the things that have come along in the 2,000 plus years since they were built, it's kind of wore the stone structures out. The materials used to build the pyramids, some of it has been taken away to help rebuild even the city of Cairo there in Egypt. But for a stone structure to exist as long as it has and still standing, it truly is a wonder of the world, ancient or modern. It does not matter. Now, Egyptians built pyramids to protect the bodies of the dead pharaohs. Circle D, know this one. The pyramids also contained items that the pharaohs might need in the afterlife. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on mummification and embalming. We went over that last time. But remember, all of the organs, except for the heart was kept in the body. You put a scarab beetle over the heart to protect it. But all the other organs, like the brain, why do I have a brain in my office? So, all of the organs went in these canopic jaws placed in the tomb with it. All the riches. You probably have heard of booby traps, Indiana, booby traps. You've probably heard of booby traps and riches and tomb raiders. The Egyptians believed that all the things that went in the pyramid with them would go into the afterlife with them. Even their assistants. If I had an assistant, if I was the Pharaoh, of course, I need an assistant in the afterlife. After or even during my mummification process, my guards would go get my assistant, drag him or her, screaming down to the pyramids, put them in something similar that you see on your screen, a sarcophagus or coffin, and they would put them in there without embalming them. They're still alive. You're making this up. This really didn't happen. Archaeologists have went in, they've opened the tombs, and they found these bodies unmummified. They have found these bodies to where when they open this sarcophagus, they've got claw marks on the inside. And when they look at the fingertips, they have splinters where they tried to claw out. You may think this is absolutely devious. You may think this is unheard of. But remember, it kind of goes back to the fact that the Egyptians cared more for the afterlife than the here and now. Even as you watch the film, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So here's the thing. That might have been the only way for that person to make it through the trials and tribulations of the afterlife to the weighing of the heart. That might have been the only way. If they're in the tomb, then quite possibly they could follow that pharaoh, or quite possibly they have access to the Book of the Dead that was also in that pharaoh's tomb. So that's pretty important because only the elite, only the rich people could afford a copy of the Book of the Dead. Even the poor people, they went to these outside of these pyramids and they buried their dead in the sand outside the pyramids, hoping that their spirit, their Ka, last section of notes there, could somehow attach themselves or even use a copy of the Book of the Dead that was inside the pyramids. And I always ask this question: are you so different from the ancient Egyptians? Well, several years ago in Tennessee, there was a big Elvis Presley fan, had a pink Cadillac. Elvis loved pink Cadillacs. Had a pink Cadillac. When he died, he wanted to be buried in that pink Cadillac. That was like one of his only wishes. And when he died, they put him in a pink Cadillac, probably in a container, but in a pink Cadillac and buried him, sunglasses and all. Put him in the driver's seat, just like that. And to him, he probably thought, like the Egyptians did, that he was going to be able to take his pink Cadillac into the afterlife, whether or not he drove up to the pearly white gates to St. Peter in his pink Cadillac, that would have been a sight, right? But people believe that. Sometimes, if unfortunately, you've ever been to a viewing or a funeral of someone that has died, um, people put things in the casket, or the person that has died has requested that some people, or some, not people, not people, but some things be placed in that coffin with them, to go with them. And I lost my grandmother not too long ago, and I had wrote um, a biography on her when I was in the fourth grade, and I kept it since I was in the fourth grade. And I'm 40 years old now, and she just passed away at 92. And I made a copy of it and I laminated it. And at her viewing, I put that um, biography of her that I had wrote in the fourth grade in the coffin with her. Um, so it it really hasn't changed to some degree about the process, not the religious aspect, but the process of burial and what people believe and what people don't believe. So the Egyptians are the group of people that we look to the most when it comes to the afterlife in the ancient world, and kind of how the whole process of burying and embalming people came to play. All right, so let's talk about the structure itself. So a pyramid took thousands of people, not years, but it did take up 20 plus years to build a pyramid. Let's be real. Thousands of people and years of labor to build. Egyptians used astronomy, looking at the stars, aligning it up, and mathematics to create pyramids. And who says you never use math? You use math. The Egyptians use math. And one of the reasons that these structures are still around today is because mathematically they are so correct in the process of cutting these stone blocks. The blocks are so perfect that when you put them together, there is a suction. There is a kind of a suction that goes on. Not to say that they're impenetrable, but if you have something that is so perfectly mathematical aligned, then there is that suction that creates between the stones. And one reason that you could YouTube Egyptian pyramids and the term aliens, the aliens built them, aliens, the aliens built them, is because they're astronomy wise, they're lined up with the stars. And that made a lot of people think, yeah, the aliens built them. Gotta be the aliens. But it could quite possibly just be the alignment of the pyramid according to astronomy. Now, to build the pyramid, the Egyptians first selected a site, just like you do when you build a home. You find a location. Then they search for stone. You got to have building supplies. The artisans, they cut the stones mathematically correct and with precision. And other workers tied these stone sleds and pulled them to the Nile River. So you had to find a stone quarry. You got to find the perfect stone. You cut them, you drag them on sleds like you see in the picture here. And then at the Nile River, workers loaded the stones onto barges, and you had to use the current because Nile River flows south to north. Got to know that for the test, south to north, south to north. And they floated them to the site that they're going to build. There were blocks were uploaded and dragged or pushed up the ramps, and all of this took precision. It took 20 plus years. It took a lot of hard work to build these structures, but they took a lot of care in precision when building these. Now, during the process, while studying the skies, the astronomies, the Egyptians also created the 365-day calendar that basically became the basis for our calendar today. The Romans will tweak it, will figure out the leap year, but all the way back then, to come up with a calendar that we pretty much still use today, impressive! Now, also, the Middle Kingdom, the pharaohs lost control of Egypt roughly about 2300 BC. At that time, a new dynasty of pharaohs created a capital at Thebes, right there in the middle of your picture there. And this began the Middle Kingdom, a time of stability, prosperity, and achievement. Egypt took control of other lands and forced conquered people to send tribute. That's a vocabulary term, I think. You need to know tribute is taxes. Anytime the government's involved, they want your money. You got to pay a little bit of what you owe, and you got to send it to the government. That's how they can do a lot of things and service projects and things like that. Not service projects, because those are you doing acts of goodness. Now, during the Middle Kingdom, The arts, literature, and architecture, they all blossomed, took off. It was the golden age. And the Middle Kingdom ended when the Hyksos attacked and conquered Egypt. I thought you said we had borders and nobody attacked them. I said it was hard to. I didn't say it was impossible. So this group of people ruled around 1550 BC. And then the Egyptians were fed up with a group of people in their land, and you had one distant voice in the distance. It was Ahmose. And Prince Ahmose led a revolt. We will not go quietly into the night. We will lead, and we will take this group of people out. And that's exactly what Ahmose did. Now, I'm going to give you a series of rulers, pharaohs, queens, and you're going to need to know what all of these individuals did. There are a lot of names, so you need to know for Ahmose here, Prince Ahmose to you, that he led a revolt in Egypt and kicked this group of Hyksos out of Egypt. Okay, so circle D. It's going to be on the quiz. I hope you're watching this video. It's going to be on the test. All right. Now, during the New Kingdom period, Egypt grew richer, more powerful than ever. Circle B. Hatshepsut was the first woman to rule Egypt. How am I going to remember that? How am I going to remember that? How am I going to know that she was the first woman to rule Egypt? Look at her name in the very middle. It's the word she. She, woman. Making the connection. So Hatshepsut was the first woman to rule Egypt. Circle C. Here's what you need to know about her. Trade. It grew. It exploded during her reign. Traders exchanged all sorts of things: beads, tools, weapons, weaponry, ivory, wood, leopard skins, and incense. Trade made Egypt wealthier. So under Hatshepsut, trade expanded. With all the things being traded, the government got a percentage, a tribute, a tax, and it made Egypt wealthier. Hatshepsut, all these things, including she was the first woman to rule Egypt. Thutmose III became pharaoh after Hatshepsut's death. He conquered even more lands. And Egypt grew richer because these people also had to pay a tribute, a tax. I'm rich. Circle E. Remember what I said a while ago. It didn't matter your skin color, ethnic background, culture, behavior, didn't matter. They conquered more lands. And the more lands they conquered, they had more people to become slaves. Slavery under Thutmose III's reign became very, very common. Slaves even had some rights. Test question, quiz question coming up, last sentence. They could own land. Slaves could. They could marry. Slaves could. And eventually they could obtain their freedom. Let freedom ring. Freedom. You got to know all this for the quiz and test. So slaves could own land, marry, and eventually obtain their freedom. All of this taking place under Thutmose III. I conquered a lot of lands, and you had to pay money, a tribute, a tax. Thutmose III. All right. Quick review. Prince Ahmose, led a revolt in Egypt against the Hyksos and kicked them out. Hatshepsut was the first woman to rule Egypt, and trade expanded under her. Thutmose III, he conquered more lands. With the conquered lands come more people to conquer that you made slaves. Those people that he also conquered had to pay a tribute, a tax. Money, money, money. All of these things. Okay. And slaves under Egypt, they had some rights. Could own land, marry, and obtain freedom. That's the quick review. Know all the people. There's more. Sorry. All right. Amenhotep the Fourth. He can be described as cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Amenhotep the Fourth was cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Amenhotep, now, he felt that priests were gaining too much power. Remember the social pyramid. Pharaoh at the top, the priest right under him. He didn't want them to gain too much power because he himself was at the top. So he came up with a plan, an evil plan. He introduced a new religion with only one God. Think about this. You get rid of the priest, you introduce a new religion in Egypt that focuses on one God, when everybody in their mother in Egypt believed in gods and goddesses, multiple polytheistic. So people already believed that the Pharaoh himself was God on earth. So if he introduces a new religion with only one God, guess who he's pointing at? Me, Amenhotep the Fourth. I am the one and only God. And you will bow down to me. I'm the all-seeing, all-powerful one God. Now, the priests, of course, did not follow this new religion, nor did most Egyptians. So he removed the priest from power. And he was not happy with the fact that most Egyptians refused to accept the new religion. People don't like change. If you are taught from baby to adult that there are gods and goddesses, deities, multiples, Ra, the sun god, had to think there for a second, Happy, the Nile River god, Isis, the goddess of magic, all of these things, it's not, you snap it away and you say, okay, the Pharaoh's the one true God now. Not that easy. The Egyptians didn't buy into it, neither did the priests. Now, Amenhotep became so devoted to his new religion himself, because that's what his new religion was about, and one true God himself, that he started to neglect his other responsibilities as Pharaoh. He didn't even act when a group of Hittites came in and attacked Egypt. And as a result of his power and his rule, Egypt's empire, kind of like a air going out of a ball, deflated, diminished, all because he was self-absorbed into himself. King Tut, King Tut, Saturday night. Hey, go to YouTube, look up Steve Martin, King Tut video. You won't regret it, I think, maybe. You might. King Tut was a boy, a mere boy, sir, a boy ruler who took power from Amenhotep, or after Amenhotep died. Now, see, he also changed his name. Amenhotep changed his name to Akhenaten. Okay, so that's why it says after Akhenaten died. Well, Amenhotep the Fourth changed his name, so same person here. Now, he ruled, King Tut, only for 9 years. He was kind of sickly, poor looking, had probably a lot of things wrong with him. Probably genetics, because dynasty, father to son, all the same bloodline, didn't really stretch out. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things wrong with King Tut. In 1922, a British archaeologist, Howard Carter, I should say, found King Tut's grave. Now, the important thing about this was a lot of what we know about Egypt, the burial practices, the riches, and everything comes from King Tut, because he, or his tomb, I should say, was really undisturbed for thousands of years until Howard Carter found it in 1922. That's why it's so important. Back in the 70s, 1970s, King Tut went on tour. Excuse me, what? Like a band, like tour? Yeah, he went on a tour around the United States, and you would have thought that he would have been a live rock band because people were, it's King Tut! They were going crazy. Girls screaming, yelling. It was unbelievable. Go to YouTube, look up King Tut Tour, 1970s. People were going ballistic. They were going crazy over this Pharaoh, the boy ruler who ruled Egypt thousands of years ago. Unbelievable. All right, so got to know King Tut, got to know Mentup the Fourth. Mentup the Fourth, quick review. Mentup the Fourth, one religion himself. King Tut, boy ruler. I'm sick. A lot of things wrong. Howard Carter found his tomb in 1922. His tomb was undisturbed for thousands of years. Everything we know about burial and things come from King Tut. Enter Ramses the Second. Ramses the Second was probably one of the most effective pharaohs, actually, of the New Kingdom. And what he is known for, and what you will need to know him for, is that during his rule, circle in, many temples were built throughout Egypt. The thing with temples, though, they built these temples and no one could go in because they built the temples for the gods and goddesses of Egypt. So they remained empty. Nobody went in because only the gods could go into these temples. It was really quite interesting. Temples were used for services. Most Egyptians prayed at home because they believed the temples were, again, houses for gods and goddesses. And after Ramses' rule, the Egyptian rule started to decline big time. Egypt was attacked by neighboring groups. I thought you said they couldn't get in because of their borders. Didn't say they couldn't. I said it was very difficult to do. Egypt was attacked by its neighbors and groups and eventually only controlled the Nile Delta, which you know as what we used to call upper is down south, lower Egypt is up north because of the flow of the river. So lower Egypt is where they controlled after Ramses' death. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes chapter 4, section 3. Everything and anything that you need can be found in Canvas under modules. You will have a quiz on section 3 as always. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You have my contact information, or you can contact me at rhughes@madison.k12.al.us. I hope you learned a little bit, something, nothing. Hopefully you learned just a little bit of things that were going on.